the stranger in the rain. Laura, exhausted after a long shift, drove home in the rain. Her roommate had texted she wouldn't be home, leaving Laura to enjoy a peaceful, quiet night alone in the countryside. The rhythmic sound of the rain calmed her, but there was a strange sense of unease she couldn't shake. As Laura wound along the dark, empty roads, she noticed headlights in her rearview mirror. A car approached from behind, faster than it should in the storm. She expected it to pass, but it stayed close behind her. Uncomfortable, she slowed down, but the car matched her speed. After several minutes of tailgating, Laura's anxiety grew. The car wouldn't pass, and its headlights glared in her mirror. She tried changing lanes, but the car stayed glued to her bumper. Her mind raced with scenarios. Was it a coincidence, or was someone following her? Up ahead was a gas station, one of the only places she could pull over on this isolated road. She signaled and pulled into the lot, hoping the car would drive past. It didn't. The driver pulled in behind her, parking a short distance away. The car's engine idled. Laura stayed in her car, heart pounding. After a few moments, the car's door opened, and a man in a rain-soaked hoodie stepped out. He walked toward her slowly, the rain obscuring his features. Instinctively, she locked her doors and tightened her grip on the wheel. The man reached Laura's window and knocked softly. She ignored him, adrenaline coursing through her veins. After a few tense moments, he abruptly turned around, walked back to his car, and sped off into the night. Laura breathed a sigh of relief, though her hands still shook. Thinking it was over, Laura drove back onto the road, but her nerves were on edge. After a few minutes, she noticed headlights again in the distance. The same car was back. It seemed more aggressive this time, speeding up and staying even closer to her than before. She frantically looked for a place to turn off, but there was nothing, just dense trees and darkness. Her only hope was to reach home before something worse happened. Panicked, Laura realized the road was too isolated for help, and the rain was coming down harder. As she neared her driveway, the car behind her began flashing its high beams, almost blinding her. Terrified, Laura turned onto the dirt road leading to her house, the car still close behind. Her breathing was shallow as she parked, hoping it would leave her alone. Instead of driving away, the car stopped. The driver got out again, shouting something Laura couldn't hear over the rain. This time, she rolled down her window slightly. "There's someone in your back seat," he screamed. Laura turned, horrified, realizing too late that the true danger had been inside her car all along. The shadow in the motel. It was supposed to be a quick weekend trip. Lily had been visiting a friend out of town and was now driving back home late at night. The weather had taken a sudden turn for the worse, and a violent storm engulfed the road, making it almost impossible to drive. Windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the downpour, and visibility was reduced to just a few feet. With her knuckles tight on the steering wheel, Lily's eyes scanned the road for a place to stop. Relief washed over her when she spotted a flickering neon sign up ahead. Horizon Motel. Lily pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, her car's tires splashing through deep puddles. The place looked old and worn down, with only a few lights illuminating the small, single-story building. The lobby door creaked as she entered, and a strange, musty smell filled the air. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged man with a tired expression. "Need a room for the night," Lily said, brushing rainwater from her jacket. The man silently handed her a key, his eyes barely meeting hers. "Room 6, he muttered, then added, You're the only guest tonight. Room 6 was just as run down as the rest of the motel. A single dim light bulb buzzed overhead, casting shadows that flickered with every gust of wind outside. She pulled the heavy curtains closed, blocking out the rain and wind. As she sat down, the bed creaked under her weight. That's when she noticed it, the old-fashioned rotary phone on the nightstand. Out of place, but nothing to worry about until it rang. Startled, Lily hesitated before answering. There was only static on the other end, punctuated by a faint whisper she couldn't quite make out. "Hello? Who is this?" she asked, but there was no response, just the eerie sound of distant breathing. Uneasy, she hung up the phone, chalking it up to a crossed line from the storm. She glanced outside. The rain was still pouring and the wind howled. She tried to settle into bed, but something gnawed at her. This place didn't feel right. Later that night, Lily was drifting into sleep when a soft knock echoed through the room. Her eyes flew open, heart racing. She waited, listening for another sound. Then it came again, a light, deliberate knock on the door. She threw the covers aside, tiptoeing to the door and peering through the peephole. No one was there, but she could hear faint footsteps walking away down the hallway. Her pulse quickened as she realized that the strange, echoing footsteps didn't seem to belong to any other guests. Returning to bed, Lily tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, maybe even the wind playing tricks on her. But before she could lie back down, the rotary phone rang again. Her heart pounded. She hesitated, then answered. "Who is this?" she demanded. This time, the whisper on the other end was clearer. "Get out," the voice said. Chills ran down her spine as the phone clicked dead. She dropped it as if it had burned her. Panicked, Lily rushed to the front desk to confront the manager. "Someone is messing with me," she said, her voice shaking. The man behind the counter looked at her, his face pale. "There's no one else here," he said slowly. "The motel's been closed for months. You shouldn't be here." Lily stared at him, confused. "What do you mean? I just rented a room." The manager shook his head. "You need to leave," he insisted, eyes darting nervously to the hallway behind her. Terrified, Lily turned and hurried back to her room to grab her things. But as she entered, she felt it, a cold presence, like someone watching her from the shadows. The air in the room seemed to shift, growing colder, and the buzzing light flickered ominously. She froze as she saw movement in the corner of the room, a dark figure, barely visible, standing near the window. It was a shadow, but it wasn't hers. Her breath quickened. Without thinking, she bolted for the door, flinging it open and running down the hallway. The storm outside raged, wind and rain battering against the building, but she didn't care. She had to get out. The hallway lights flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows along the walls. As she reached the lobby, the phone at the front desk began to ring. It rang once, twice, then stopped. The eerie silence that followed made her legs move faster. Lily ran out into the rain and fumbled with her car keys, her hands shaking. She jumped into her car and drove off, her heart racing. As she pulled away from the motel, she glanced back in the rearview mirror. The flickering neon sign and the shadowy figure she'd seen in her room were both gone. It wasn't until she was miles away on the verge of tears that she remembered what the manager had said. The motel had been closed for months. But if that was true, who had handed her the room key, and who or what had been staying in that room before her? Do you know? Feel free to leave your response in the comment section now. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more such stories.